on, guys? In today's video, we get this thing back on the road. So to give you a quick little rundown of what happened with the car, a couple of weeks ago I was driving it, had just filled it up with gas, was cruising down the road, and all of a sudden the car kind of started to sputter, started to lose power. I look over at my laptop, which I still have in the car because I'm still working on my tune, and I realize my AFRs are steadily climbing until we're up into like 16, 17, and then all of a sudden the car dies. Just typically a sign of running out of gas, but I had just filled up. So I pull over to the side of the road, start to do some diagnostics, realize my fuel pump is not turning on at all. I can even manually trigger the fuel pump in the ECU, and I can hear the relay clicking, absolutely nothing as far as sound out of the gas tank. So it led me down the path of realizing my fuel pump has a problem. Do the dreaded call to my wife, have her come pick me up, get my truck and trailer, bring the car home, and you'll see what we do to fix it. If you're not familiar with this car, we did a complete LS swap on it. So I have a Tanks Inc. EFI tank in it, which means I need to drop this gas tank out because the access for the fuel pump is of course on the top. Naturally, I did just fill this up with gas like I mentioned, so it's going to be completely full. So we got to see if we can get this thing out without covering ourselves in gas. Now I need to cut any of the little zip ties or anything that are connecting my vent line or keeping my fuel lines in place. Everything else should be loose enough to allow this to come down, and then we can disconnect the fuel lines once it's down. I'm going to use my motorcycle jack to go underneath this. I think that'll give us a nice flat platform. Now that the tank's supported, I can just go ahead and unbolt the two straps. That's really the only thing securing this to the car. With the tank out from underneath the car, we obviously have a lot easier access to everything. We pull our vent line off, our fuel pump, carrier, and everything is underneath this plate right here. So we have a set of 8mm screws to pull out. We should be able to pull out the full assembly. Once those are out of the way, we're ready to lift this out. If I remember correctly, it's a bit of a process to get this thing in here. Huh. Well, that's interesting. The ground on our fuel pump is burnt. Yeah, the little tab is literally kind of melted. Huh. That's wild. What the heck would cause that? Loose ground further up the system? Huh. We'll have to look into that. We continue to try and pull this thing out. I'll give you guys a better look at what I'm talking about. Bit of a hassle getting it out of there, but this is what I was talking about. So the power was hooked up and everything looks fine, but look at this ground tab. It's completely burnt, and the connector is burnt itself. I mean, I am very lucky that that didn't cause some sort of fire or something. Like, what in the world? That's completely wild. I've never seen anything like that before. I don't know what could have caused that. My only guess is a loose ground kind of further up the chain, like I mentioned. Like maybe that ground was getting kind of loose. Maybe it was causing this to overheat, like it wasn't an efficient enough ground, and that got really hot and started to kind of melt. All I know is I'm very thankful that we pulled this out when we did. The fuel pump I just took out is a Walbro 400 liter per hour. You know, most people say that's good for probably 500-600 wheel horsepower. You'll see a big variance online about what people think fuel pumps can handle. What I've decided to upgrade to is their, still a Walbro, but it's their Hellcat 525 liter per hour fuel pump. The difference between these two is not a crazy amount of money. I mean, we're talking about maybe $30 difference. Fuel pumps are not crazy expensive. So I like to think anytime anything breaks on the Camaro, I want to upgrade it to a better version of the one I had before. Either one of these is kind of way overkill for my current power levels. I'm making maybe 400 wheel right now, but I have plans to go forced induction. And if I want to get crazy and push 600-700 plus, I'd like to know the fuel pump and the fuel system is set up for it. So once I have this in place, my biggest holdback will be my Dash 6 feed line, but that should be more than enough for the kind of power I plan to make, at least for the near future. So it looks like a lot of our wiring connections and stuff are going to be different. Not a big deal because the new fuel pump comes with all of the proper connectors. So it's basically going to be pulling out all this old setup, setting it up with the new wiring, making sure our screen, all that kind of stuff is all set up at the same depth so I can get the most fuel out of my tank, and we'll be able to swap this back in. Now I'm ready to try and fish all of this through this tiny hole. Now we're ready to slide this whole assembly back underneath the car, and I am going to go ahead and make up an additional ground as well that will just connect straight to the frame, just as a redundancy to make sure that this whole system is very, very properly ground. I don't want any melting or any issues to happen again, that's for sure. Everything's hooked back up. I'm gonna go ahead and hit the key for the first time, make sure it primes, make sure there's no leaks and everything looks good. If all that checks out, then we're ready to try and start it. Sounded like it primed. I'm gonna do that 2 or 3 times. Make sure we build up enough fuel pressure to, for sure, find out if we have any leaks. Everything looks dry under here. Let's see if it'll start. Not bad. Well, that's going to do it for this video, guys. I've been out test driving the car and I'm happy to report everything is working exactly like it's supposed to. So I have an entire shelf full of parts for this car, and I also get a ton of requests for more content. So I'm going to start making a lot more videos on the Camaro. Drop a comment below if there's anything you want to see in particular. I have sway bar, I have subframe connectors, subframe bushings, a complete vintage air AC system, all kinds of stuff to go into this car. So you guys will see all of that very soon on the channel. I appreciate you guys watching as always, and I'll see you on the next one.